Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. I'm Raffi, joined by Davian and Jonah, back on after taking a little hiatus after talking some March Madness with us. Today, we're going to be talking about the NFL draft, discuss some of the winners, some of the losers from player perspective, team perspective, etc. So, before we get right into it, boys, how are we doing?
I'm good. I'm hype. I loved this draft was interesting. Besides Shador Sanders, I feel like he just dominated the headlines. Like rightfully so. Like he was a projected first rounder, but man, just like I was so happy when the draft ended because the conversation finally died down. I could finally go on my social media and not see his face on there. Um, I guess it wasn't perfect timing for him to go in the first round. But in any case, I'm good. Weather's been getting better in this bummy old town in upstate New York. So, yeah. Rafi, how have you been?
We are currently thriving. NHL playoffs have been great, so I'm having a good time with that. NFL draft certainly was interesting, as you mentioned. Mel Kiper might be now one of the most hated draft analysts of all time after just freaking out over the fact that Shedeur Sanders went as late as he did, and we'll get into that shortly. But outside of that, I mean, I'm doing pretty well. Hopefully, Mel Kiper is doing better now. I saw that he gave the Browns an A+ because they got Shedeur in the fifth round. Jonah, how are you? How are you doing? How are things? Good to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. I'm doing good as well. I think it's been a good week so far. David and I are kind of killing it in our business simulation right now.
Yeah, we are.
And other than that, draft was quite interesting. Had a bit of monetary involvement that as well. I'll get into that later. But overall,
Yeah.
it's good to talk more ball.
Can't wait to hear more about that story once we get more into it. But before we do dive into that story and then in general winners and losers, let's get right into our team specifically, who won, who lost. David, how do you feel about the Patriots draft class?
Winners, winners, winners. We got a man who said he would die for our quarterback. I mean, how can you not be hype about Will Campbell? I think it was a very good draft. Get Will Campbell, get Trayvon Henderson to help out Drake May. So you really build around Drake May. You get another wide receiver in the wide receiver room, which is always great in Kyle Williams. And so overall, I think a very good draft. Pick up more on the defensive side later on the draft. Draft a kicker, which was interesting, but I think the Patriots will have to have consistency in that kicker space. I'm very glad that we did pick one. So I think overall, very good draft. Added depth where we needed. Shored up the depth on our offensive line, and added more pieces around Drake May. I couldn't be happier as a Patriots fan. When you draft offensive tackle, running back, wide receiver in your first 3 rounds, I think that's the perfect draft, and that's exactly what we needed.
Yeah, and overall, the Patriots defense is overall pretty solid already. Yeah, it
It
took
is,
a bit of a
yeah,
step back
yes.
last
Yeah,
year.
definitely
We'll see
interesting.
what we'll see what Mike Vrabel can do with this defense this year. Hopefully, he can bring it back to the Belichick era where the defense was such a big facet of their identity. But Jonah, moving into your team, how do you feel your team did?
Yeah, so I'm from Maryland, right across the DMV. So I'm loosely support the Washington Commanders, but I'm more of a fantasy guy. Overall, though, definitely satisfied with how those first 2 days went. I thought Josh Connerly was a pretty good tackle at Oregon. I'm not some super film guru, but it seemed like he held down the fort, gave Dylan Gabriel enough time to throw. Good in the run game as well. I thought that was a fine pick where he's at. And I'm very satisfied with that Trey Amos pick at the end of the second. Like I saw there were some mocks that had him in the first, some like borderline first round, second round. Like if he went at 29th overall, I don't think people would have really batted an eye. It would have been fine. And we definitely need to recoup some of those lost cornerback assets, especially because of that egregious Emmanuel Forbes pick a couple of years ago. Still not sure why they didn't pick Christian Gonzalez, but overall, great couple of days. And day three didn't seem like it was a total disaster either. So overall, pretty good draft from Washington, especially with shoring up the tackles, having Josh Connerly on the other side with Laramie Tunsil now as a true marquee tackle. Like Jaden Daniels is going to have time.
Yeah,
The
no, you will.
Falcons, guys, the Falcons finally drafted edge rushers. Oh my goodness, they did it in the first round. today is a great day. I am very, very glad that the Falcons finally decided to invest in the edge. Yes, they traded up quite a bit to number 26, going up 20 picks and then giving up their next year first round pick. Yeah, it's a pretty steep price, but James Pierce was a guy that a lot of people had in the top 20, potentially even in the top 15. So you're getting good value. I can't complain too much about the Falcons draft because once again they finally addressed their biggest hole, and with two young players, hopefully they can develop and come along on this team. You already have a lot of the good pieces all around. I would have liked to have seen them potentially take another wide receiver just to pair up really well with Drake London, but I can't be too upset with this Falcons draft class. Again, we'll see if that first round pick next year bites them in the butt, but I also like the Ram strategy where it's screw the picks. Just take the best man available. If you're really dead set on this guy being a solution, then go for it. Jalen Walker is, I don't really know if he's going to be a linebacker or an edge. That's something that's been talked about a lot just with his profile, just with his metrics. So we'll see what winds up happening there. I do hope that he becomes either a really good edge or a really good linebacker because we see a lot of players in the past where they're like Isaiah Simmons, for example, was okay, where he's going to play. Like he's going to be, he can do everything. But he kind of was a master of nothing, but really, like he knew how to do everything, but he wasn't amazing at any position. So you kind of want to being like, okay, we have this piece of the puzzle, but he doesn't really fit anywhere. And he's gone through numerous teams now. Now he's on the Packers, recently signed with them. So we'll see what happens. I am more optimistic about Jalen Walker, but that's always something to consider. But let's dive right in then to just overall draft stuff, winners and losers. Davian, I'll throw it over to you first. Who was a player that you think was either a winner or a loser coming out of the draft?
I don't have a player that was a winner, but I do have a person that was a winner, and that was Jonah in the first round. For context, Jonah and I were playing some great game of poker, and this guy was just so attached to his phone. I'm like, dude, like, there's no way like you care about every single pick like this. But Jonah has a reason for that. So before I kick into all my winners and losers, I want to give Jonah the spotlight to talk about his first round story.
Yeah, so over spring break, I placed a bet. It was plus 265 on under 2.5 quarterbacks in the first round. Over time, the odds changed a bit, but at the end, it was probably around like plus 150. So I thought I got a good deal in when I bought. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we've gotten through the Steelers pick, and there's still only one quarterback off the board. I'm pretty sure, like this bet, if I'm feeling good. And then I see that the Giants trade up at 25. I'm thinking, okay, I mean, I can afford them to select Shador Sanders. I just think they're, as long as just no other team trades up for Jackson Dart, that'll be fine. And then I see them draft Jackson Dart, and under all accounts, I'll get into it later. I don't think Jackson Dart can play. I was shocked at that, and I was pretty sure that some team was going to draft up, trade up, and draft Shador Sanders at the end of the first. Like I thought the bet was cooked. I was just looking, praying that no team traded up. We got to the Eagles, or no, not the Eagles. It was the Chiefs at pick 31, and then I see the pick has been traded, and I'm thinking, oh, this is where my bet ends. This is where the money goes down the drain. And then I see, oh wait, they just pick swap with the Eagles. The Eagles are not going to take any quarterback here. And then I see them go through the pick, and I see now the Chiefs pick at 32. Another great pick, Josh Simmons, by the way. And there I cashed it. It was a sweat of a night, but we got our profits. We come out. Not how I expected the bet to hit, but it happened.
Yeah, no, it was crazy because Jonah and I we have class, so it's like every time we're walking back from class, it's like, why are these odds changing? Is my bet cooked? What are the analysts saying? Like, because at the end of the day, nobody really knew how many QBs would go. I mean, honestly, I thought there could be easily three QBs go. The Steelers pick one, maybe like the Seahawks or the Saints or a team like that. Really, it was pretty shocking to see that only two QBs were taken. But looking back now, given everything that we know now, hindsight's 2020, it makes sense. And so, I'll kind of get into my winners and losers. And honestly, in a way, Shador Sanders was a winner. Like, yeah, he fell to the fifth round, but he got, I think, the best position to start, right? Like, he's competing against Joe Flacco, who's old. Love Joe Flacco, but he's so old. Dylan Gabriel, who, like, come on, like, nobody expected Dylan Gabriel to go before Shador Sanders. Uh, Kenny Pickett, I mean, I love the Jersey born guy. Well, is he Jersey born? No. I'm not sure. Either way, Kenny Pickett. The guy speaks for himself. And Deshaun Watson, who's busy at massage parlors. So at the end of the day, I feel like Shador Sanders really got the best out of it. So yeah, that's one of my winners. Another winner is Jordan Love. Finally gets wide receiver one. The Packers finally pick a wide receiver in the first round with Matthew Golden. And so I could go on and on with my winners. But I'll pass it on to Raffi to talk about his winners and losers, or at least winners for now.
Yeah, I think the Browns draft class, picking up Shador Sanders, I think really saved this draft class. We can get into it shortly about the
Really, wow.
trade of the Browns trading out of number two overall to the Jaguars. I'm conflicted about that trade just because the level of Mason Graham in comparison to a guy like Travis Hunter, I think it's a pretty decent drop off in terms of talent after the top three. And even arguably, I think like the top three players in this draft were really Genty. You had Hunter, and then you had Carter. Cam Ward, I guess you can throw into that, but I also just think he was a good enough quarterback to where a QB needy team, if a QB needy team was at the first overall pick, he would likely go there. So I did think there was a little bit of a drop off. We'll see what happens with that first round pick. The Jaguars are certainly an enigma. I feel like I always go into the year expecting the Jaguars to have a solid year, and it seems like things just haven't worked out for them of late. I hope that they have a really good year, and if that first round pick winds up being in the 15 to 20 range, then was it really worth moving down? Yes, you still picked up pick 36 as well, so you technically picked up a mid first round pick then and essentially a late first round pick then at 36. The drop off between the 30th player selected and the 36th player selected is not that big of a drop off, especially in this draft class, for example. But overall, though, I still have the Browns as losers. I like the running back pickups that they had, Judkins and Sampson. I think they're really going to work off each other. And Nick Chubb, we all love Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, Browns legend. Unfortunately, just the injuries really loomed too large for him this past year. He had a decent year, but the Browns wound up letting him go, and they replaced him with kind of a thunder and lightning type of duo. I think they're trying to replicate what the Lions are doing. But the big thing for me was, why did you take Dylan? Like, I'm just confused why
Yeah,
they would
I'm
even
very
consider
confused.
Shador
Yeah,
Sanders in the fifth round, even though
yeah.
they'd already taken Dylan Gabriel. Because, David, you mentioned now they have five quarterbacks, and none of them really scream like, "Oh, this guy can really take the ropes." And I guess is a good thing for Shador Sanders, as you mentioned, because there's not going to be a lot of competition or crazy competition. But this Browns draft class really confused me because I felt like they could have, with all these picks, they could have addressed a variety of needs because this team is really, really bad. But they doubled down on running back and then they doubled down again on quarterback, which your backup quarterback is not going to really win you games unless you have like it's all luck with your if your backup quarterback steps in and plays well because that would imply that your starting quarterback got hurt. So the
Yeah.
Browns are a team that overall I think Shadur Sanders getting him in the fifth round is good value, but I'm not too wowed with just the fact that they decided to take two quarterbacks. I guess the value was there, but I'm not too big on it overall. Overall, I think a lot of teams had pretty solid drafts. I would have liked to have seen the Bills take a wide receiver. I know that was a hot topic in Buffalo, and their GM Boone was not very happy about being asked about that. But nonetheless, I think they could have just used like a day three pick or something on a wide receiver. I did like
Yep.
the Bears draft class a little bit, and that's not just because I'm from Chicago, because as we
Ciao,
both know,
Bears.
I do root for the Falcons. If anything, David's more of a Bears fan than I am. But you really help out. You help out Caleb Williams a lot. You pick up Colston Loveland, who him and Tyler Warren is what are you really looking for in a tight end? And depending on what you envision your tight end doing, that kind of determines which tight end you're going to wind up picking. Luther Burden, if he gets his act together, was a projected 10 to 15 to go in the 10 to 15 range. So if he gets Zach together, that's a really good pick. And then down the stretch, picking up some depth at corner, linebacker, D tackle, and then picking up some offensive linemen too. Overall, I think the Bears had a pretty good draft. Jonah, what are your thoughts on some of these teams' drafts, players, etc.?
Yeah, of course. So, winners and losers. The first guy that I think of as an immediate winner is Ashton Genty. I mean, we knew he was going to go early, but I mean, the Raiders just seem like a perfect landing spot. There's literally no competition for this. I'm sorry. I mean, I love Sincere McCormick and all, but he's no Ashton Genty. And Alexander Madison, actually, oh, it's Raheem Mostert now. He's definitely no Ashton Genty at this point in his career. That just seems like such a free opportunity, especially with a guy like Pete Carroll, who's historically given a lot of carries to Marshawn Lynch. I could see 300 plus carries in his rookie season easily. Just he'll be a monster right off the bat. Another winner I see is Bryce Young. A lot of people mocked Jalen Walker throughout the entire draft process to Carolina. It ends up being Ted McMillan, who I think, other than Travis Hunter, was clearly the best wide receiver in this class. He just puts up numbers. He's big. He's just got good instincts. He's not the fastest, but we've seen as a whole wide receivers, you don't need game-breaking speed to be a great receiver. I mean, at corner, it might matter a bit more, but at wide receiver, we see guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who ran like a 4.5, 4.6 40, and he goes for like 1,300 yards every year. So I could see Tet doing very similar things, but I think Bryce Young's a winner. And yes, if we're talking about players that are losers, I mean, I think just any Bears passing option. I don't think the Bears necessarily had a bad draft. Ben Johnson clearly has a vision. But if that room stays as is, that is going to be way too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, Colston Loveland, I don't hate the pick. I I get where he's going. I agree with the consensus that, it's Ben Johnson, Sam Laporta. But I never thought that Cole Kmet was a particularly bad tight end. And then
I
Luther
agree.
Burden.
Yep.
Luther Burden, I think it was a good value in the second round. He broke out as a freshman, which I think is a very good sign that if you have a guy like Ben Johnson, you can coach the star into him, get that talent really fully fleshed out. But I'm just
Yeah.
confused about how many people are going to be fighting for those targets in that crowded receiving core.
I think that's a give and take type of argument. And I can certainly understand how that can be a downside, and I agree. I do think it's bad if you're, especially like fantasy football. Everyone plays fantasy football. Roma Dunze and DJ Moore's value and Cole Kmet's value, they all just went down in value by a decent amount now that you pick up Luther Burden, now that you also add
Yeah.
Colston Loveland. So you're completely right there. It's going to limit all these other players' production. But for a guy like Caleb Williams, who didn't have a particularly fantastic rookie season, he was all right, but it wasn't anything crazy. I don't want to be the guy and sound like the homer here, but they did what they needed to. They patched up the offensive line. They did a good job via trades and free agency. We'll see how they all function together in one unit. They'll have the offseason to work things out, and hopefully they can play off of each other and be solid. I know Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman as the Falcon had a little bit of an iffy report of if he's good or if he's bad. He was decent in one blocking, not great in another. But I think Caleb Williams, it's similar to what I liked, kind of what I liked for what you want to see with a young quarterback, similar to what was mentioned already with picking up McMillan for Bryce Young. You want to surround your quarterback, give them as good of a possible team to really succeed and take that next step. So that's something where I understand where you're coming from, but overall, I do still think that the Bears did a good job supporting Caleb Williams. And now they're kind of putting the pressure on him and saying, okay, you have a bunch of weapons now. You have some decent running backs now. You have a solid offensive line. I'd say it's an average offensive line, a little above average offensive line, nothing crazy, but much better than what he had to go through last year. And now it's, okay, we've surrounded you with all this talent. Now we want you to take that next step. And now it's more on him. The ball's in his court to really take that next step. So we'll see what happens. Time will tell, obviously. But we'll see what winds up happening. Davian, any other thoughts about this NFL draft class? Anyone of note? Any player that you thought went too high, too low? Teams that reached, did good, did bad?
Yeah. Trying to think. Um, hmm. Reached. I was confused why you don't take Tyler Warren over Loveland, but maybe that's a better fit for the Bears. But I think the Colts really lucked out with him just falling right into their laps. So I think that was a solid pick by them on that side. Um, in terms of uh, other winners, I mean, another loser is Quinn Ewers. I think in a way, Ewers could have stayed in college and gotten $8 million. Instead, he decided to declare for the NFL draft and ended up on the Dolphins, which doesn't isn't a great kind of place to end up in. But
I mean, he would have needed though to transfer then because it seemed like it was
yeah,
officially Arch Manning's time at University of Texas. You weren't going to let him sit a third year. That's
yeah,
just ridiculous at that point.
no, you're
And
100%
I
right.
also don't think he did any favors for himself this past year in college football. Like he was
He
decent to
didn't.
start the year.
Yeah,
That injury really derailed his season mid-year. It seemed like he
yeah,
wasn't really 100% after that, and then it seemed like Arch Manning was getting some momentum, and then they threw Ewers back in, and he was still iffy. He had a chance. He either got hurt or he didn't have a spectacular SEC championship game either versus Georgia. So I understand what you're saying, but yeah, we'll see what happens with Quinn Ewers. He was certainly a player that a lot of people had mocked before the college football season as a potential first round pick, could potentially go higher. And unfortunately, we see this with a lot of players that are projected sometimes in the first round. We see a lot of people who rise and get to the top of the draft, see like Cam Ward, and then you have other players like Quinn Ewers who didn't have the ideal season and then tended to fall. I do think a a team that was made a confusing decision to me personally, and I get it, you don't want to deal with Sanders. I get it, you don't want to trade up for Dart, but Tyler Shuck is someone that I don't know too much about him. I've watched a couple more people in the loop who do more draft prospect stuff. They spoke pretty highly of him, pretty decently of him. But this guy's gonna be 26 to start the season next year,
yeah,
older
yeah.
than a
It's
lot of most quarterbacks who you consider young. And yeah, he wasn't taken in the first round, but the rookie contract goes 4 years for anyone outside the first round pick. So that means by the end of his final year of his contract, he's going to be 30 years old already, and that's just his first deal.
yeah,
I I understand the Saints not wanting to trade into the first round to get Dart, and you're obviously not going to get Cam Ward and Derek Carr's injury situation. Where do you kind of wind up there? But even a guy like Jalen Milrow, could have seen the upside and at least worth a shot in the third round. If the Saints had taken Jalen Milrow, for example, the third round, I think a lot of people would be pretty open to that idea and say, okay, he's pretty different to what Derek Carr is as a quarterback. He's much more mobile. He's much more athletic. Derek Carr, more of a pocket passer. He can move around a little bit, but you don't expect that too much out of him. But to go with Shuck, who could be a great quarterback, but with all the injuries that he's dealt with throughout his college time, there's still an element of rawness. And the fact, again, at the end of the day, he's going to be 26 to start next year. I would have been more accepting of the Saints taking Jalen Milrow, for example, at the end of the second round or third round, where the Seahawks took him, than taking Tyler Shuck at pick 40.
yeah. I agree. I feel like there was a lot of QBs that really kind of went unnoticed till later in the draft, and just Chuck going, Gabriel even going above Jalen Milrow because that happened, right? Am
I
I
think
correct when I say that?
I think Miller went right before Gabriel.
Okay, okay, yeah, you're right.
Milrow went 92nd and Gabriel went 94th. So slightly
Okay,
down.
okay, then that's my bad. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, I think that the biggest losers of the draft, if I had to point on one team, would have to be the Browns. Basically, just based off what you said, Rafi, just very odd draft strategy. You're bringing in now a player who, uh, it's just like, I don't know. You're bringing in a player who's, yeah, he has something to prove, but now the media attention's all on him, and you're making your training camp now a reality TV show, in all honesty. And I think there's a reason why Shadur fell. I don't think it was justified that he fall. Like I think he's better than Jackson Dart. Um, but locker room presence is a big thing, especially in the day of the media. And the one thing I want to see, the one player I'm most interested to see their development, besides Jack Betch, wide receiver who's drafted by the Bears, because I think he has an amazing story, is going to be Shador Sanders. And I think that's what's going to be on everyone's mind of was he supposed to be taken, or were teams like the Giants right on passing him up? And more stories will come out to see what happened. But, Jonah, what are your thoughts on Shador Sanders? Because I know you mentioned that you don't like Jackson Dart earlier on, but did you like Shador Sanders going in the first, or do you think it was justified him falling out of the first? And if you're a GM, where would you have drafted him?
Yeah, so if I were a GM, it really depends on how I would expect other teams to value him. Without that knowledge, I personally had him mocked with a lot of others with him at 21 to Pittsburgh, but that was assuming other people. From what I saw and what other people analyzed, I thought it was understandable that he fell out of the first round. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I can see he's maybe not really a first round talent. Once he fell out of day two, I'm thinking, okay, this might be a bit ridiculous. Like, I would have said for any team that took him in the third round, I would have, or even the second round, I've said, yeah, I can completely understand that. But clearly, the interviews must have been bad. And part of what I've heard in that department is the fact that D, Dion must have some influence on that because the way Dion has always carried himself is that he never really prepared for anything. He was just so good at the game that he just never tried, went out there and was a stud because he he just knew how to play the game. And unfortunately, I don't think he realizes that Shador isn't quite on that physical level as Dion. But
Yeah.
as for the Browns, I don't know if they're a loser. I think they made some good picks. I think they got appropriate value for Travis Hunter. It wasn't a fleece of a trade back, but they got fair value. I think Mason Graham's going to be great for that. Great for that defensive line, especially because they needed more help on the inside.
Yeah.
As for their picks in day 2 and 3, I think their draft would have looked a lot better if they didn't take Quinshawn Judkins and Dylan Gabriel. Because I thought Shador Sanders in the fifth round is obviously a great pick, and I think Dylan Sampson's a baller. I don't know if they really needed to double dip on those positions. And I think, for example, if they took one of the edge guys, like if they took like Donovan Ezaraku or even Mike Green, but he has some allegations that probably shouldn't talk about on here, they would like that could have really bolstered up that D line. And then if they just took, I think Xavier Watts was still available at their end of third round pick where they took Gabriel. That really could have helped out that safety room, which is pretty barren. I mean, they have Delpit, and I don't even know who their other safety is.
Yeah, and they still like wide receiver. Yes, Tillman had like a 5 6 week stretch where he balled out, but he wasn't consistently good throughout the entire season. Jerry Judy had his games, but he wasn't anything crazy. So there was definitely opportunities for the Browns to take some other players as well. Then you hit the nail pretty hard too with the Ravens, mentioning like they got Malachi Starks, another solid safety to pair with Kyle Hamilton. So he's going to probably be more of the safety. Kyle Hamilton can move around a little bit more, and that's just a great pick. Great guy that fell to them. Mike Green, yes, there's all that baggage that comes with him. If you remove that, he's a very, very solid athlete. He was a projected first round pick, but obviously you have to factor in everything when you're considering all these players. And there's a lot of reasons why he wound up going to the second round, but we'll see what winds up happening there. Emory Jones was the guy that a lot of people had in the first round. Going into the year, he didn't have a fantastic year, but a little raw. We can see what happens with the Ravens. But yeah, it's certainly interesting. I will say, and this will kind of be the close too, it was interesting for the Ravens to have taken a kicker in the sixth round. I don't think that should go completely unnoticed, taking Tyler Loop. Tyler Loop, pretty solid at Arizona. A lot of people say that he can kick well over 60 yards. He's practice kicked over 70 yards. So obviously you're not going to be expected to kick a 70-yard field goal in the NFL. But anyways, the fact that they took a kicker in the 6th round and even drafted a kicker, I think speaks very largely about what's going on with Justin Tucker. We haven't heard a lot in quite a few months at this point. I believe that story broke around the Super Bowl or slightly after. So I do want to point that out before I close the show, that is certainly something to keep an eye on what the fallout is of that Justin Tucker situation. Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. Jonah, thank you for coming back on again. Davian, always a pleasure to talk to you as always. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel as well. And yeah, have a good one. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on the NFL drafts, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. See ya.
Peace.